Hey, it's Matt here, and I wanted to thank you for tuning in to another one of our Real Talk interview series. Today we're going to do a deep dive talking about title insurance and title companies and how they're involved in your real estate journey. I have here with me today Kelly Wald of Republic Title. Kelly, thank you for being here with me.
Sure.
Just to kind of kick things off, can you tell us about you and your experience in title industry?
Yes, I got into the title industry right out of college. I went to UT, and I didn't even know what a title company was, but my sister was working with a title company, and so I went, and that was 27 years ago. I've been in the business since, and with Republic for 21 years.
So you've seen a lot of transactions, I imagine,
Yes.
too, during that time.
Yes.
Yeah. So title companies are often involved in all real estate transactions. What does a title company do?
We insure transactions. There are two policies that are issued. One is issued to a lender if there's a loan, and one is issued to the buyer. And basically, for a lender, we ensure that the lender's in first lien position. For an owner, we ensure that they have good title from beginning of time up until the day they close.
Okay. So that's basically what title insurance is you're insuring the title to their property.
Correct.
Okay. So people have this insurance. When I think of insurance, I also think of insurance claims.
Yeah.
Why would somebody file a claim on their title insurance?
Well, there's a number of reasons. It could be an issue where a prior owner was involved. It might be a fence issue, a building line, a prior lien, tax liens. There's a number of things that could require you to file a claim.
Okay, so we talked about you've been through a lot of transactions. What's kind of one of the crazy or most unique claims that you've had come across your desk?
Well, I'll tell you my first claim. I was a young closer. I thought I knew what I was doing, and I think I did, but I had a closing with a lady that had inherited the property from her parents, and she had lived in the property for 15 or 20 years, and we closed on the transaction. And about 8 months later, the buyers called me. They had received a tax bill for about $10,000, and they wanted to know what it was for and issued a claim. And basically, the previous owner that had lived in that property for 15 years had never filed for a homestead exemption. So that property carried a homestead exemption from the deceased owners.
From her parents.
From her parents. And because she had never actually filed for her own, that exemption dropped off. And that's where the tax claim came from. And of course, we were responsible for it. That was my first claim.
Yeah, so somebody paid a $10,000 tax bill on behalf of the owners.
And the thing is that she didn't even realize that she had to file for an exemption, so it's not like she was trying to be dishonest at closing. She had lived there, but she had never filed for her exemption.
So exemptions are an interesting part of the title work that I don't even think about when I'm thinking of the things you guys do, is you have to look into the current exemptions that are already there.
That's correct, and that's why we ask a lot of questions starting out, because exemptions are, some drop off during the year, some you can file in the middle of the year, some you can't file till the next year. So all of that determines on how we're going to prorate taxes or collect taxes.
Yeah, interesting. And we could have a whole conversation on exemptions, which maybe we'll do another time. One of the things while we're still talking about title insurance is at the end of the transaction, or towards the end, the buyers will get a closing disclosure, and on there it will say services buyer shopped for. And I think people see that and they're like, oh, I should be shopping around like I would shop around for my car insurance. How is the title insurance priced?
Well, that's a great question. So in Texas, our rates are regulated. So every title company pays or has the same rates. Every policy is going to be the same no matter where you close. The endorsements are going to be the same. The only thing that differs is our closing fee. That's the only way we differ.
Okay. So really then a person's not choosing it based on the policy, because everybody gets the same policy and the same price. They would choose based on service or customer experience.
Correct.
When they look for a title company.
And knowing the underwriter is important too, because you want to pick a company whose underwriter is going to be around if you need to make a claim. So.
True, yeah. You want to know that they can pay your claim. When we kick off a transaction, we'll often talk about like opening escrow. And as an agent, I think about it as I'm delivering the contract to the title company, and then you guys sort of kick off a process. Can you briefly talk about what happens during that escrow process?
Sure. The first thing we're going to do if the contract calls for earnest money is receive the earnest money and deposit it right away. I think a lot of people don't understand that earnest money we're required to deposit it immediately. We can't hold on to it. So we often get phone calls, you guys, this check's not going to clear. We thought you were just going to hold it. But it does get deposited. And then our process begins where we start researching the title from beginning of time up until we close. We determine who the owners are, make sure the taxes are paid. If there are liens, we make sure that they're paid at closing.
Okay. A part of this process, you generate a document called a title commitment. Can you talk to us about what a title commitment is?
It's basically a preliminary policy. It's what we're going to insure to you at the end. So it tells you things we're going to cover, things we're not going to cover. And it exists of 4 schedules. As a buyer, you're going to want to look at A, B, and C. A tells you the description of the property and who the vested owner is. Schedule B are things that we don't cover, exceptions from coverage. And then Schedule C are things that we have to clear prior to closing. So that's where you might find if the seller had an IRS lien or a bankruptcy or there's a divorce involved. So as a buyer, you would want to flip to Schedule C and review it.
And sellers too, also Schedule C?
Yes, and agents too. They should be looking at it too, just because that's sometimes where you find out things that maybe have not been disclosed.
This is a surprise part of the transaction.
Exactly.
Yeah, so pay attention to the title commitment. Don't just pass it off as a disclosure. The other document that often I think gets delivered during this process is the HOA documents. So maybe not a document, but a set of documents. How is that important to the transaction?
Well, it's very important if first of all, you want to know that you're in an HOA. Secondly, let's just say you want a certain breed of dog and that development doesn't allow it, or you're intending to rent the property and that development doesn't allow it. So the HOA docs or deed restrictions, that's all super important that you review that prior to closing. It could be the difference between you being able to purchase the property or not.
Yeah, and I guess also if people want to make changes to their property, I usually think that's where they should look, is the HOA documents.
Yes.
Yeah, so before they want to paint it pink, check with the HOA docs first.
And getting those documents is really important. It's a seller obligation. Title companies facilitate it, but it is a seller obligation. If you read the addendum, it specifies that it's a seller obligation. Remember, the buyer has the right to opt out of the contract after they receive those documents. So you want to get it in a timely manner.
Sooner rather than later.
Right.
That's a good point. I think people forget about all the ways the buyer can get out of the contract. And the sooner, at least when you're representing the seller, the sooner you can get the buyer all the documents, then more of their options to cancel go away. You see transactions from a different perspective than most people think because you're this uninterested third party. What are some common mistakes that you see just watching the transaction?
Well, for let's just say a cash buyer, when you have a cash transaction, a survey is not required. It would be important for you to get one, but a lot of people don't want to pay the expense of $400 or $500 to get something that's not required. But years ago, I had a transaction where a man paid about $450,000 for a home, paid cash, did not get a survey, and then when he was ready to sell it, the new buyer had to get a survey, and there was a pool in the backyard that was completely in an easement. Totally uninsurable. And that guy could not, the only way he was going to sell that property is to find a cash buyer that didn't care, because no lender would accept that exception to a policy. So I always think, here you're going to spend $450,000 on a house, but you don't want to spend $450 on a survey that could have been the difference for you.
Yeah, it's almost like people kind of being cheap on their due diligence. I think I see that the same way. Like, we don't want to spend a lot of money on an inspector. These sort of things help people in the long run. It's a good investment, like with the survey. With sellers, do you see mistakes that they're making on their end?
I mean, I see a lot of things that sellers maybe didn't know or didn't understand, like perhaps they did a HELOC, they've never taken money out on it and they just assume that it doesn't apply. But it still attaches to the home, even if there's never been any money taken out, we still have to get a payoff, close the account out. Or they think in Texas, because they purchased a property that they're, single and their spouse lived there, that maybe they don't have to involve their spouse, and that's not the case. So I think they just, on sellers' ends, it's just about facts.
Having all the data up front. And I guess when you mention home equity, stop using that once you're selling your house.
Yeah, sure. This is where Texas differs from a lot of other states, and people have a misconception about why title insurance is worthless. You pay so much money for it. Well, Texas issues title insurance differently than other states. So other states insure all the way up until the day they can see that something's been filed, and Texas insures all the way up until the day of closing. So somebody that has a HELOC loan, the day prior to closing could go take out $50,000, $100,000 and close on that property, and nobody knows that they took that money out. So the title company is ensuring the fact that that lien is going to be paid or taken care of at closing. And we have a lot of claims because people are fraudulent. They don't tell the truth.
Yeah.
Even though they swear under oath at closing that they haven't done that, sometimes they do.
Should buyers be worried about that, or?
Well, that's why they have title insurance.
There you go. Yeah, so they're covered.
Yes.
And that's also why it's expensive for whoever's paying for it. Is there?
Right, because we have a lot of claims, and because we cover that gap period, that's why it's more expensive.
That's interesting. When we think about kind of going back to the process, I think everybody thinks the last step is closing. What happens at closing?
Well, hopefully it's fun.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah, typically we close buyers and sellers separately. So it doesn't matter who closes first. After the last party signs, then we work on funding. But at closing, if you've got a loan, you're going to sit down, you're going to go through all the loan documents. We're going to answer questions for you. We'll notarize documents, make sure everybody is who they say they are. And then we'll do a closing.
And closing will take how long usually?
It depends on the person.
Okay.
I've had them take 10 minutes and I've had them take 4 hours.
Okay.
So everybody has the right to sit and read documents, and some people are very diligent about it. But a typical buyer closing takes 30 to 45 minutes, a seller 10 to 15.
Okay. And now when I think of closing, I think of signing a lot of documents. And on the back end, what do you guys do to kind of complete the closing?
Well, after everybody has signed, if there's a loan involved, we work with the lender to fund the loan. You have to remember those documents are loan documents. So the lender wants to review them, make sure everything's signed and dated, that all their conditions are met. So we work with them to make sure that happened. And then they'll authorize us to fund, and that's the magic moment when the house becomes the buyer's.
Okay. And so when do I get my keys?
Good question. That really is between the seller and the purchaser.
Okay.
But often the keys are left at the title company for the buyer to pick up after we have funding authorization.
Okay.
Sometimes agents will coordinate that, or the buyer will take the key when they do their walkthrough, but typically keys do not get released until funding occurs.
Okay. Since you're here and you're with Republic Title, I'd love if you just take a moment and share with us why somebody may want to choose Republic Title over another company.
Well, there's a reason that I've been with Republic for almost 22 years. They're a great company. You want to work with a title company that has a good underwriter that's been around for a long time and that will be around for a long time. And it's about relationships. I mean, you know the people that you can depend on, that are flexible, this is a hard industry, especially right now with rates where they're at. Everything is fast moving and down to the very last second, and you want somebody who's flexible and who backs their work is backed. It's flawless.
Yeah. We always like using you with our clients. I want to thank you for being here today and sharing this wisdom with us. And for our viewers, I want to thank you for tuning in again. As always, it's a pleasure to connect with you in person. Feel free to reach out to our team if you have questions, and we'll also have information about Republic Title in the video description, so if you want to learn more about them as well. Thanks for tuning in, and take care.